welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast.
I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew, and this is episode 15. Today we're going to be spending some time in the Southern Hemisphere. Our guest on Knitters of the World is Bluey, who's coming to us today from Sydney in Australia. And then we're staying down south, and we're going to Buenos Aires in Argentina, where we will be speaking to knitwear designer Joji Locatelli.
Very exciting. But first of all, we're going to have a little bit of basic intarsia with Andrew, and we'll be sewing the Steeks with me.
That sounds good.
Yes, so I'm going to put my knitting down.
Our first segment today, however, is Bring and Brag, which is our chance to bring and show the works or the knitting
Finished
projects
objects
that we've finished. And we haven't had Bring and Brag for a long time, but we can today. You've got something to show.
We can today. I have finished the Firebirds, which is very, very exciting. Finally finished. So this is the Firebird designed by Jade Starmore, and she originally wrote it as a cardigan for a lady, and I've adapted it to a gentleman's jumper for Andrew.
This always gets me. You see me as a gentleman, but I'm touched, I'm flattered.
Back in episode 11, I first of all told you about the Slavic legend of the Firebirds, which is the inspiration for Jade's design. So the story is usually that first of all, a firebird is a large bird and all of its beautiful feathers glow very brightly, and just one feather is capable of lighting a complete room. And the story usually starts with the hero of the legend finding a single feather and then going on a long and difficult journey to first find the firebird and then capture the firebird and then present the firebird to his king. Well, my difficult journey wasn't that difficult, but it was long. I have knitted a total of 170 firebirds. So 170 firebirds have been knitted and therefore captured for eternity in this beautiful jumper, which I can now present to the king.
Why the king?
Yes.
Gentleman and now a king.
Yes. Happy birthday, Andrew.
Oh, thank you very much, dolls.
So Andrew turns, we won't
old.
say.
Just turn older is enough information.
Yes, next week. So
Wednesday.
We're recording this on a Saturday. You'll probably get this on a Tuesday. And on Wednesday is Andrew's birthday, so happy birthday, Darls.
Yeah, thanks, Darls.
But I actually have to take it back because it has to be blocked.
Yep.
But I didn't want to wet it, and because I didn't have time to have it completely dry before recording this episode.
Yep. Would have been a bit sad to have a wet jumper on the show.
Yes. So it's completely finished. I'm very happy with it. It does need to be blocked because it fits in very well, but I am going to just stretch the bottom of the sleeves a little bit wider in the blocking. But first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about a couple of the finishing and construction details that I did at the end. And I think this is going to be really relevant to a few of you because, as you know, we're doing the Fruity Fair Isle Carl at the moment, which ends on October the 31st. So there's been some really beautiful Fair Isle garments that have already been knitted and the pictures are up and it looks fantastic to see and read them all. But some of you are still some of you have already cut your Steeks and some are still doing the finishing. So I think what I'm going to show you is probably still interesting and relevant to a lot of you. So in the last episode, we had some whiskey.
From Islay.
From Islay.
Which Chris pointed out to us, Islay.
Yes, so we're pronouncing
apologies to all the people who can speak Scottish properly.
So with a little bit of help of Islay whiskey, Andrew cut the Steeks last episode. So that was first of all, it looked like it didn't have any arms and it looked like a great big pillowcase. So he cut the Steeks for the armholes and the neck. And then since then I have knitted down the arms. So what I did for that was pick up the edge stitches around where I cut the Steeks and then knit the sleeve from the top down to the cuff. And to do that, I had to take the pattern chart and turn it upside down and read it backwards. Otherwise, the Firebirds on your arms would have been standing on their heads.
Down. Yep. So did you do that a different way to the normal way of doing it, or is that just the way?
No, that's the way
Okay.
the pattern was written.
Okay.
To do that from
So the body's bottom up and the sleeves are top down.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it sounds a little tricky to say that you're reading the chart upside down and backwards, but it's not. You just turn it around and you're actually reading it the same way. And if you put a little sticky tape or whatever on whatever line you're at, that makes it really easy. But somebody did ask me, how did I join the shoulders together after last episode? So all I did there was take the front and the back pieces, because it was knitted in the round, and turn it inside out and do a 3-needle bind off. And that's how the shoulders were joined. But what I want to do now is show you a very quick 3-minute video of me picking up the stitches to knit for the sleeves on the edge stitches of the Steeks. So I thought it's best if I make a video and you see up close what I'm doing. It's really quite an easy procedure, but if you've never done it before, it's interesting to watch. So enjoy the next 3 minutes. So here's the Steek, which has been cut open. It had 10 stitches in it. The middle 8 ones were knitted in a checkerboard effect, so alternating the colours. And the stitch 1 and stitch 10 of the 10 Steeking stitches are called the edge stitches, and they were always knitted in the dark background colour. So because it's stocking stitch, it's curling around on itself. But if I try to open it up, you'll see this fine line of dark coloured background, and that's the edge stitch. So what I'll be doing now is picking up the stitches that I need to knit the sleeve from this edge stitch. Now the edge stitch is a typical knit stitch, which is shaped like a V, and I'll be picking up and making my stitch in the left loop. So the left loop of this edge stitch. So the loop closest to the chart pattern stitches. And then start attaching your yarn. This is the colour I need. And I just knit a stitch straight through like that. And then I put it in the next stitch, the next loop, and knit through. And it's pretty easy to follow the edge stitch row or column. So that's why it's good to do it always in the background colour of your ferrule pattern. So there we have it. I've picked up all of the stitches that I need, which is 138 stitches right around on the outside loop or the inside loop of the edge stitches, and you can see that naturally just makes the Steek fall in flat. The method that I'm using is purely because this wool allows me to. It's the Hebridean 2-ply by Alice Starmore, but it's the kind of wool which is perfect for steeking and ferrule, because the fibre, each little fibre has a little hook, so it naturally wants to sort of hook in and stick. It's what they call sticky wool. So there's very little chance of that unravelling. Definitely if you had a superwash, it would just unravel very easily, and even some non-superwashes will unravel way more than this does. Normally what I'm going to do is cut down to only 2 stitches width, and then over sew to make it secure. I don't have to do that till right at the end, so I'm just going to leave it like this while I continue to knit down for my sleeve, and I don't have any worries that that's going to come undone. That's because of the wool I'm using. So I hope you found that fun to watch. So like I said on the video, this yarn is incredibly sticky, and the last thing I did was trim the Steeks and sew them down, and before that Andrew tried the jumper on probably at least 5 times.
At least. It was.
So even putting it on and off constantly, nothing frayed and there was no problems. So everything that I'm showing you today about steeking and trimming steeks and sewing it down is only relevant to this kind of wool. So it's not something that you can just copy and apply across the board. You really do need the sticky yarn. And for those of you who are new, I've now turned the Firebirds inside out, if you're wondering where the Firebirds have gone to. They haven't flown away. But this yarn is the Hebridean 2-ply, and it's the Alice Darmore yarn. Then I wanted to show you, actually I might put a picture over Andrew right now, because I thought it's interesting to show you the 2 armholes, and one of them, the steek, will be untrimmed and unsewn, and the other one will be sewn. So you can see the difference. So I always trim it down to only the steek down to only 2 stitches width. And Alice Darmore suggests that you cross stitch it over. You can really do it any way you want. I normally cross stitch it, but this time I just had a fancy to weave my thread in and out of the stitches. So that's what I did. The most important thing is simply just to catch down the edge that could fray so that it won't fray. And then over time, just simply with wear, it kind of felts a little bit. And because it's sticky, it just sticks even more and there's no problems. So now I'm going to show you another 3-minute, very quick video of me cutting the front neck and the back neck steeks, or not cutting them, but trimming them down and then sewing them flat. So that's what I did for this section here across there. I think that's just interesting to see. And in this case that you'll see, I wove my needle in and out of the stitches. Yeah, so enjoy. I've done one side finished and one still has to go. This side, I had a little bit of a steek here and a big steek along there, and that's been finished. So that's been cut back to 2 stitches width and then sewn over. So you can see that lies flat and you can't even really tell. This side, it hasn't been done yet. So this tiny bit of a steek here, that was the back neck steek. And this is the front neck steek here. So you can see it's just this extra little piece of material sticking out like that. So the first thing I need to do is chop it back till it's only 2 stitches and then sew it in. So I'm going to show you how to do it on this small panel, but it's exactly the same on this. And you can see that's just, you can understand that it's just simply a longer panel. So now I'm just going to cut this along, just tidying it up and trimming it down to only 2 stitches width. Still got my thumb underneath. And then this little one at the back. Okay, so that's a trimmed steek. It's just shorter, but it still looks the same. The next thing I do is get one of the background colours, and now I'm going to split it. So this is a bit tricky because it always wants to curl back on itself. So if you keep your fingers close to where you're splitting it, it's easier. Okay, now I'm ready to go. So I just take an outside thread here, I go over the top, in and out, and then back the opposite way, just like a weaving. So now I'm just going over the edges like this. You really don't need to do this, but okay, and then I just thread my needle through, and that's how I finish off. Now you can see that both sides look the same. So again, I hope you enjoyed that and you found it helpful. We'll say goodbye to the Firebirds for now. It's a little hot for Andrew to be wearing it, so that's why he wasn't wearing it today. But maybe in the next episode it'll be blocked and you'll see him in it.
Yep.
Which will be exciting. Yeah. So thanks for all your encouraging comments and things. The people have been very generous with their comments on Instagram. And that's always lovely to receive. So thank you.
Last week, we launched a Patreon page to give our viewers a way to support the Fruity Knitting podcast and the production of the show. You can find an announcement about that launch and about the Patreon page on YouTube. There's a special episode called Fruity Knitting Podcast in Review. And you can also find the Patreon page itself at patreon.com/fruityknitting. We'll include both links for that in the notes below. We've had a really great response to this announcement, both in terms of people deciding to be patrons and support the show, the production of the show, and also with the feedback that we've got. And we really appreciate both of these things. Both are really encouraging. So thank you very much for that. If you would like to support us, please check out the video from last week, so the in-review video, and also the Patreon page. You can find out all sorts of how we got to where we are, what we're asking for, how that works. And there is also on the Fruity Knitting podcast Ravelry page, we've got a thread in there, especially if you've got any questions about that or if you've got feedback. Yeah. So you can check that out.
Yeah. And people have been doing that, which is great.
Yeah, but thanks very much for the response so far. It's really encouraging.
Yes, thank you.
I started knitting about 2.5, 3 years ago when a colleague of mine from America was working out here with me on a project, and she asked me if I knew any local yarn stores, and so I looked some up and found them and took her there because she didn't know her way around Sydney in the background. And so when we were at those yarn stores, she said, "Can you knit?" And I said, "Well, when I was a little boy, I kind of tried to teach myself to knit by watching my mother, but didn't really." And I said, when I was in my 20s, there was a pattern for a jumper in a newspaper, and it was a white Farrar with a blue stranded design around here, and it looked really nice. So I thought, well, how hard could this be? And I knitted and finished it, following it very mechanically, and it ended up being a little bit too tight for me, so I gave it to a friend of mine and she loved it to death, but I never really took it up again. I thought, well, I can do that. So knitting was not something that boys or young men did around here, so I never went any further. And she said, "But you'd be really good at it, and besides, it's really good for passing the time on aeroplanes." And both of us spend a lot of time on long-haul flights, 8 or 9 hour flights. And she was right. I'm addicted to knitting. I really enjoy it. I love the arithmetic, the mechanics, the mathematics, the design, the construction. And for me, I love the fact that the book of knitting has no back page. It just keeps going and going. There's more techniques, more designs, more wool, more yarn styles, and just keeps going and going. So it's never ending. It's just great. Some of the things that I've knitted over the last couple of years are, say, from the beginning. I think this is the second sweater I made from some leftovers of another jumper that was blue and yellow. So I made this for my daughter. A simple Fair Isle pattern from the Drops magazine, online website. A pair of socks that she wears to bed when it's a bit cool here, which isn't very often, but it does happen. A cute little hat that she really likes wearing when it's cold as well, or even when it's not cold. It's quite nice. Another pair of socks with some leftover yarn that match, even though they're different colours. And my husband gave me a book called Knit Your Own Boyfriend, and so I did. This is what we call Knitted Daniel. And yes, as you may guess, he's Swedish, so Knitted Daniel's been everywhere. I've also done the necessary scarf knitting, and here's an example of a double knit. So it was pretty arduous, a lot of swapping of yarns all the way through, so that was good. My favourite scarf that I've knitted though is also a double knit, which is with two gradients, swapping two gradients, and it just came really, really nice. I really like that one. So it just goes on for days and days and days. And I'm sitting here with Paddington because that's where we are, in Paddington, Sydney. This is the first jumper I knitted about 2.5 years ago. So it's just a simple yoke sweater with stranded knitting, very Swedish style, which I knitted for Daniel. This is a very cozy and warm, snuggly cardigan or jacket really, that I knitted. And it's knitted with two strands together, black and white, with a different cuff and waist and collar. This is the first time I ever steeked something, so it was knitted in the round and had to cut all the way up the top and then sew an enormously long collar band all the way around the edge. But I quite like the way it turned out, very cozy, nice and warm. This jumper is another stranded yoke jumper, which I bought the wool while we were on holiday in Tasmania, and I went into a wool store there and said, do you have any Australian wool? And they recommended this fantastic white gum wool, which is made from very organically raised sheep. And this design is from the Icelandic Letlopi website with a 20th century design. And this jumper is made from Letlopi Icelandic wool, which I bought in Tokyo of all places. And they didn't quite have enough of the one colour, so there's a slight difference between the top and the bottom, but actually that ended up being a design feature. This is a raglan sleeve, and it's from one of those mini websites where you just key in the dimensions of the sweater that you want, and out pops a full knitting pattern. This one, as you can see, is a hoodie, and it's the first time I ever had to sew in a zipper. So I had to go out and buy a sewing machine and learn how to use that, and learn how to sew in a zipper. It's another raglan sleeve, quite a simple design, and I had to work out also how to fold the edge over and put in a cord, which has a good effect. And this is a cardigan, another zip-up cardigan, and it's made of a very heavy cotton, so the actual cardigan is quite heavy but not too hot at all. A simple cable that goes all the way around, and it's intarsia, as you can see, because I didn't follow the blue all the way across and did a lot of yarn swapping over and over and folded all the way through here. So it was an online plain cardigan, and I did all the measurements for the Swedish flag so that it came out as accurate as I could possibly do it.
So thank you, Bluey. That was Bluey from Paddington, Australia, and he has been doing a lot of knitting because as he may have said, he's travelled a lot with his work. I think he said to me that he has been to 63 different countries.
Well,
that's a lot of plane flights and therefore a lot of knitting, so well done.
Yeah. I was inspired and encouraged by Bluey's intarsia, which I've taken on. We'll see that shortly. And also he's got the cardigan with the zip up the front.
He's got a couple. He's got one with the hood and then the Swedish flag for his husband, which is really cool.
Yep, and I loved the scenes of Sydney. It was a few very Sydney shots there with the harbour bridge in the background and the beaches.
And the beaches.
We don't
really
have
gorgeous.
beaches in Frankfurt.
We totally missed that scene. You made us very homesick, Bluey.
Yeah, always. And the birds. There were birds there.
Totally. Yeah.
So that was cool.
Yeah. So Bluey was a country lad. He grew up in Gippsland in Victoria, but he's obviously now living in Sydney. And you may actually be interested to know, why is he called Bluey? Well, in Australia, if you're a red-headed male, you are often called Blue or Bluey, and Bluey was red-headed at one stage. And it's quite interesting because growing up in Australia with red hair, it's not really considered a very attractive thing to have red hair. And I absolutely hated my red hair as a child. And I really hated being called ginger, and I hated being called carrots.
Carrot tops, isn't it?
Or carrot tops. Oh, totally. But I think Bluey is really quite a cool name. I think there's nothing derogatory about being called Bluey.
But you didn't get called Bluey.
No, because only men or boys get.
That's a bad deal,
not
isn't it?
girls, yeah. We just get called ginger or never call it ginger. Only a ginger can call another ginger ginger.
Yeah, I'll put that in the notes. That's a really good reference too.
That's a good song. You've got to go listen to it if you don't know. What's his name?
Tim Minchin.
Yeah, I kept thinking Tim Winton. I thought it's not Tim Winton. He's the author.
That's another great Australian.
Yeah. Okay, so I did look up Bluey because I was quite interested, and just a little bit of historical background. I think this only applies for Australian males. So, but the terminology started in the 1890s, and then it was during the World War I and World War II, it became very, very popular. So every Australian male soldier that was red-headed was either called Blue or Bluey. And then from then on, it went out into civilian life. So there's a little bit of history on Bluey's name. But thanks again, Bluey, for contributing. It was great to see you and see all your great designs. So keep knitting.
Yep. So it's my turn.
Your turn.
We could have put this under Bring and Brag dolls.
Oh, yes.
This is my finished object. This is the finished back of my hiking jacket. There it is. Let's show the shaping up here.
Oh, yes.
It's hard to see.
Some shoulder shaping.
Slipping around. Anyway, so casting off around here to get the shoulders and the neck cut away here at the back. And here, just very quickly, is the little contrast colour edge on the hem here.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the front of it. Trying to show this nicely. There's the front. Goes like that. And there's the back. But
the back.
Let's jump onto the new bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we might even cover me this time. Andrew gets covered a lot in our episodes.
Yeah.
So we'll cover me with a close-up picture of what Andrew is knitting on now.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'll keep
So I
talking
won't-
behind the picture.
All right. So I won't have to show it. But, okay. So we're starting one of the front sides, which is really exciting. Andrea got me started here because, like the beginning of the back, it's a little bit complicated. So what we've got this contrasting bit on the edge, and we used the 3 tips that we got from Diane, who is Not Just Hats on Ravelry. Really good tips that we got. We had the idea of doing the contrast ourselves, but she gave us some tips to make that work better. And I'll go through them very quickly now. They'll be in the notes again. But we started knitting down here, and Andrea has done this because this is too complicated for me at this stage. So you started knitting and you did a provisional cast on to start with, okay? And you start in the normal colour, right? In the main colour, right? Do a couple of rows in that main colour, and then doing the contrast colour. The next really clever trick is at this edge, again, you'll see it in the picture nicely, the photo. what we do there is, and I did this the first time, do 3 rows of purling. And what that does is, rather than just doing a knit, purl, if you do 3 rows of purling, it makes this kind of sharp edge on it, which is really amazing to see. And it just automatically makes the fold in the material. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so what we've done is we've just knitted, stocking stitched up and made a hem out of it. So it's not a rib. It's doubled over at the bottom, just in case that wasn't clear.
Okay. Yeah. So knit down, do these 3 rows of purl to get this kind of edge on it, which folds it back. And then we go back. And then this is the bit that I'm really unclear about, is how you bring in this provisional.
Yes, because I did that bit
cast
for
on.
him as well.
Yeah.
You take off I did a crocheted edge. I did a crochet and then that's how I did my provisional cast on. And so then you make your stitches live again, and it's basically you knit them together. Okay, so like a 3 needle bind off, but you're just knitting them together.
You have your main colour when you start off at your provisional cast on, because it stops any contrast colour showing through as a sort of shadow there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a really clean result. It's really cool. It's exactly the same as what we did on the main body, the back part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one
and
thing.
it's extra stretchy as well.
Yes.
That's why you do the provisional cast on.
Don't pull it off the neck. And the other thing that's happening now is, like I mentioned with Bluey, we're doing a bit of intarsia, okay? So we've said that we're going to have this one panel of contrast colour, and it's going to go on the outside of the jacket. So this edge here will be the zipper edge, and this is the edge round towards the back.
And that's going to go up the seam because it's done in pieces, so up under here and a little bit over the shoulder.
Yeah. So I reckon it's coming along really well. Yorkshire Wildlife Trust wool and Rowan hemp tweed. Am I right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the wools go really well together. They're perfect in colour and texture, and I'm really enjoying it. Really excited about getting some progress, and the rows are shorter, so you just do 1 row after another.
Yeah, you're knitting really fast now, aren't you?
Really fast. I'm knitting about twice as fast as I was in the back. Good.
But you're doing a great job. It looks really beautiful.
Yeah, I think actually, Andrea, your word was, that's perfect. Yeah, I do listen to some things you say.
Selective hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. As you know, we're running 2 Carls at the moment. The first garment Carl headed by Andrew.
Yeah.
And the Fair Isle garment Carl headed by me. And both of those will end on the 31st of October.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be getting the prize. No matter what random number generator.org says.
Yes. So many of you have already finished your projects and put up pictures in the threads. That's brilliant. It's been such a lot of fun to read about and see the pictures and see the things that you've learnt, and it's been great, the flow of conversation where people have had difficulties and how they've overcome them and how other members have given great suggestions to help. So that's always really exciting to read and a really fun part of the Carl. I think it's the best part, actually, isn't it?
I've seen that people, I haven't had time to look into that, but I have seen that people have been very active and chatty, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
You know.
And we are going to do another video collage of the final finished objects. So you have to get your photo of your final garment in by in the Objects Only thread in Ravelry by the 31st of October. But then you've got another week after that to take a 20-second selfie and get that to us so that we can make a collage for the following episode. So again, just make it 20 seconds, no longer, because we want it short and snappy, and that makes it really flow really well. So all you need to do is put your garment on, say your name, say the design of your garment and the yarn you've used, do a little twirl, and that's it. We just watched, if you haven't seen Stephen West, he's done a song, knit, purl, and do a little twirl, something, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
look for Stephen West.
Put on a scarf and do a twirl or something. It's really cool. It's really funny. You have to watch it. We really want to see your finished objects. It was so much fun seeing the collage halfway through the Carl. So both First Garment and Fruity Feral, get your objects finished, put your pictures in, and then do your 20-second selfie. And just to reiterate over the prizes that we've got for the Fruity Feral Carl, we're donating £25 worth of Alice Darmore's yarn. So you'll be able to go to her website, Virtual Yarns, and look through her beautiful yarn. You can spend hours there just reading the storyboard on all the colours, and pick 25 of your 25 yarns of your choice, 25 pounds worth of your choice. You can also, if there's a garment that you want to do and you want to buy a kit, that 25 pounds can go towards that. So that's something we can organise or talk with the winner for that. For the first garment, Carl, we have got Margaret Radcliffe's The Knowledgeable Knitter, which is a great, great book, and it's going to ensure that you knit many more successful garments. It's got some great little tips for just small alterations, so if you want to put in waist shaping, or if you want to change a shoulder from a drop shoulder to a set-in sleeve, all of that kind of nice bits of knowledge to help you, or different bindings off that you can do, or how to fix up mistakes that are staring you in the eye. And
Yep.
Yeah, so we think that's a really good gift for the first garment, Carl. So thank you for all your contribution, and keep knitting.
Yep.
So that's the end of our Carl news, but before we get straight on to the interview, which I know you're all excited to see, I just wanted to draw your attention to my new buttons, which I've just bought and sewn on my Amaryllis cardigan. I'm not quite sure if I like them or not. They're sparkly and they're a bit blingy. I had intended really to find buttons that were going to just fade into the button band. So I'm not sure if these are a little bit too
too loud.
Yeah, Jujaw looking. But they are kind of fun. So if you have opinions about buttons and would like to share yours with me, I would be interested to hear your opinion. So you could leave a comment below or in the thread. Yeah. So let's move on now to our interview with Joji Locatelli. And she is such an interesting lady. She is a really gorgeous mixture of intelligence and style and elegance and humility, which makes her an extremely special person. I had so much fun to meet her over the interview. I think she's a very interesting designer. She does beautiful, beautiful, elegant designs, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing her talk about them. So thank you for being with us. We're both going to say goodbye now.
Yep.
Please enjoy the interview. If you have enjoyed the podcast, then please subscribe and consider becoming a patron to keep us going on air. And we look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.
Yep. Thanks very much for joining us. And yes, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. My guest today is the Argentinian knitwear designer Joji Locatelli. Joji started self-publishing her knitwear patterns in 2008 and has been very active as a designer on Ravelry since then. Her designs have become extremely popular. For example, the sweater Boxy has been knitted thousands of times.
Joji has also, together with the Finnish designer Veera Valamäki, published 3 beautiful collections of knitwear designs called Interpretations, Volume 1, 2 and 3. The knitting and crafting culture in Argentina is quite different to that in Northern Europe or North America, and has had a definite influence on how Joji started designing. I'm really fascinated to hear more about this, and I'm extremely happy to have Joji with me on the podcast today. So thank you, Joji, for being here today with us, and I extend a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Andrea, for having me in the podcast, and it's a pleasure for me. And yes, as you were mentioning, here in Argentina, as I grew up, knitting was very different to what I know knitting like today. I think Argentines, we have a very different way of seeing what the craft is like, and how we work on knitting is very different to what most knitters now in Ravelry know as the craft. And the main difference was that when I learned to knit, my mom taught me, and there weren't many books or patterns available for us. Or any at all. And so my mom would see an image in a magazine that she or I liked, and she decided that she could replicate that. And so she was not scared of gauge, she was not tied to any yarn, and she would just go with me to the yarn store, and we would pick any yarn that I liked, mostly based on what colors I had imagined for this particular sweater. And then the task was just to go home and do a gauge swatch and make the mats, and then figure out what was a possible way to construct that garment that she had seen on any magazine, not necessarily a knitting magazine. So that's the way I learned how to think of knitting. Like we were not tied to patterns. The way she taught me was that anything could be achieved, anything could be copied or created. You just needed to find the proper needles and the proper stitch counts, and then you're good to go. And as I met other knitters, other local knitters, I discovered that we all learn that way. Most yarns that we have available to us have no label, have no content information, no yardage. You just like a yarn at the shelf and you bring it home, and then you decide to play with it and discover, how you need to work with it. And I think that learning that way made us more free, and I think we take knitting in a more logical way, more creative, and yes, that's the way. Knitting is very interesting in Argentina because you're basically all the time freestyle, and yes, and also the styles of knitting of garments and things that Argentine knitters like to create and work with, most of the time is different to the rest of the world. For some reason, even though the weather is really warm here, and we have time, Argentine knitters like to knit with mostly chunky or quick knits. I still can't understand why, but chunky yarns are very popular here, unlike in other parts of the world. And of course, we like to wear colorful garments, and yes, so I think that makes us quite peculiar knitters, more brave maybe.
So were the most people knitting as hobbies, or in order to produce their own clothes as an alternative to buying them, or what was the motivation behind a lot of the knitting?
I think that in the older days, knitters knitted their own garments because it was considered to be cheaper than buying ready-made garments. And at least that's the reason why my grandma and my mother used to knit themselves. My mother had 4 children that she had to buy sweaters for, and definitely for her it was cheaper and more convenient to make those sweaters her own. And I think that's the reason why most knitters here learned to knit, to be able to provide with cheaper, good quality garments for their families. And there was a time not long ago, I would say 10 years ago, when there was a big increase in the price for ready-made garments in Argentina. And many young women learned to knit. I picked up my needles again at that time, but also many older knitters went back to the craft because it was so much cheaper to knit for yourself. And knitting was so popular that the yarn stores were crowded with people. It was really incredible. You could find 100 knitters at the time trying to buy yarn, and they would buy a big bulk of yarn to bring home and to knit for all the season. So you would have to wait in line or even pick a number and wait to be served and helped by the ladies at the yarn store. And this was absolutely, I think, because it was cheaper than buying ready-made sweaters. Unfortunately, the cost of materials here has gone up quite a bit because of our economy. And I think that because of that, the craft has sort of lost its appeal, because it's not cheaper to knit your own garments anymore here. And I think that sadly we have lost a lot of knitters because of that. I don't think people here, many knitters here yet consider knitting a hobby. I think many of them take it as a task. I need to knit my daughter or my husband a sweater for this winter. And therefore, since now it's cheaper to buy them, many of them don't knit anymore.
And you told me a story about how your mother would buy yarn to make sweaters for all the kids, and you were still young then, and she would knit up a gauge, and then you would have the job of doing all the maths and working out the design for all the different sizes. Tell us about that.
That was my first attempt at designing without even knowing that I was actually doing the hard work that's involved in creating a pattern. As I told you, Mom and I would go to our local yarn store, and she would get a few lots of yarn. She would say, I'm going to make blue sweaters for everyone, and then striped sweaters for everyone, and then a cardigan for everyone. And she would bring all this yarn home for all 4 of her children. And then she would make a swatch and say, okay, you can have your sweater first. I can make yours first, or you can have your sweater only if you make the math for me. So my task was to take her gauge swatch and to measure my siblings or a garment of them, and then make instructions for Mom so that she could make those jumpers. They were usually very easy. She was not a very fancy knitter at the time, so probably they were just a drop shoulder sweater, and all I had to do was to calculate how many stitches she needed to cast on for the front and back pieces, but still for me was quite interesting. And I remember looking forward to those days when we went to the yarn store, and then I would take my knitting notebook or her knitting notebook and write down all the instructions. Okay, Mom, for Marco, you need to cast on this amount of stitches, and for Letty this. And yes, when I finally decided to try my hand at designing, I never thought of, oh, how am I going to grade or transform this pattern into other sizes, because I considered that job natural. I was doing that even before learning to knit, because I already understood what was involved in the process of creating a garment by the way my mom knits.
That's amazing. That's certainly very freeing and a great thing. So what's also very interesting about you is that you actually studied medicine and worked as a doctor before becoming a full-time knitwear designer. So can you talk about your transition from being a doctor to a knitwear designer, and also include the time that you spent as a yarn dyer and working in your local yarn store?
Yes. Well, medicine was a big part of my life. I did get my degree as a doctor, and I enjoyed that those years very much. But the moment I got my degree in 2004, I realized I was not made to be a doctor, and so. But it was the only thing that I was trained to do. So I had to work as a doctor for a couple of years until my first son was born, and it really, really made me sad. It was not made for me, and so I kept thinking. At the time I was reading a lot of knitting blogs already, because I was already obsessed with knitting, and of course, being pregnant with my first kid, I had knitted like a gazillion sweaters for him and blankets, and all I could think of the whole day was about knitting. And so I kept telling my husband, oh, if only I could find a way not to go back to medicine and to do something related to knitting. And we have a yarn district here in Buenos Aires where there are several yarn stores grouped in a very small area. So weekly I would go there with my husband and see if they were calling for, if there was any ads that showed that they were looking for staff. And a couple of times there were ads, but of course I was overqualified for the job. And even though I sent my resume a few times, I was never contacted to work as a clerk there. And so one day, reading these knitting blogs with my mom, I always shared everything I did with her. And I said, look, these knitters are dyeing yarn in their kitchens. Why don't we try our hand at these so that we can have our own hand-dyed yarns? Because we didn't have any of those available in Buenos Aires. So we did. We bought a few skeins of undyed yarn, and we dyed it with common dyes. And the results were so-so. But I documented everything that I was doing, and I took nice pictures of the yarns. And it turns out that thanks to a good friend, the owner of one of these yarn stores, my favorite one, saw these photos, and he reached out and said, I don't have anything like this in my store. Would you be interested in selling me your products? And oh my God, yes. And that was the beginning of my story with being able to work with something fiber related. I will always be grateful to this great man who gave me my first opportunity to make some money to help my family. And so I started dyeing yarn, a lot of yarn, because it turns out that the yarn that we were making was really popular because no one else was offering any hand-dyed yarns. And there was a time that I realized that I had turned my house into a studio, and my kids were still too young, and my house was a mess, and I couldn't cope with the demand. And so I decided not to dye anymore. And then they decided that they enjoyed my conversations with them because I knew a lot of what other knitters in the world liked, and they hired me to work as an employee at the store, which was a fabulous time. And even though I worked in the back office, every now and then I had the opportunity to come to the store, to the actual shop, and help people who came looking for advice the same way my mom and I would when I was young. And they would come with a photo of a magazine and say, my daughter asked me to make her this sweater. What would you recommend? And for me, it was that exercise that I did as a kid all over again. Okay, let's try to find the color, and then you need to make the swatch, and then make sure that you build it this way or that way. And I was so happy. I can't tell you what a joy it is to be able to do what you really love. And then my husband and I decided that we could try dyeing again, because there was a big demand for roving, hand-dyed roving, and the store couldn't find anyone that would do that for them. And we had all the equipment because we had already been dyeing yarn. So actually, my husband and I, for a couple of years, became expert dyers in roving, and we did this at the same time as a lot of my design work, but I don't think many people knew that we were doing this behind the scenes. And again, it was a great experience, because I got him involved in the yarn business, and we were doing very well. The business was helping us money-wise in a big way, and so yes, it was a great opportunity for us. We only stopped because the demand for this product in the country stopped, and that's when I decided to dedicate more time to designing.
That's very, very interesting progression. So let's talk about your designs now, because I find them very beautiful and feminine, and also very flattering, I think, to the female figure. How would you describe your design aesthetic?
For a long time, I thought I didn't have a design aesthetic, because I would design anything, and I couldn't find a relation between many of my designs until I realized that, as I was telling you, Andrea, and as probably happened to many of you, entering Ravelry connected me to many knitters from all around the world. And it was my first time knowing other cultures. I hadn't had the opportunity to travel a lot before getting into Ravelry, so I didn't know what other cultures dressed like, and what they liked to knit or wear. And I became fascinated with minimalism, and all the knitters that I admired on Ravelry were they were probably Scandinavian, and I just adore their very simple style and basic, and I wanted to move towards that direction. Every time I start a design, I want to move towards that minimalistic look. And then for some reason, I just can't help it. I add a few details here and there that turn into big details, that turn into very feminine ornamented garments. And I think that's because of who I am. I'm an Argentine girl with Latin origins, and we are taught to be very ladylike, very girly. Latin women, they like their long hair, their makeup, their nails, and their frills and lace, and that's who we are taught to be when we grow up, girly girls. And it looks like the more I try to be minimalist, the more this Latin girl fights to come out. And so I would say that my style is a blend of those. The things that I really look up to and that I admire. What I admire is the ability to say a lot with a design without really having too much in it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And
so keeping the elegance there. Yeah, but I think you achieved that very well.
So I think it's a balance between those two. I think the essence is still a Latin American style, but I'm always trying to make it more wearable for everyone around the world, because you design for your audience, you design for someone who you would like to please. So
Yes.
I think that's
Which
what
actually
makes it.
which brings me on to my next question, and that is it difficult to find a balance when you've got a concept, an artistic concept in your head that you'd like to give full rein to, but then to still think it's got to be a workable pattern, user-friendly for an average knitter? Do you find that hard sometimes?
Absolutely. I have all kinds of design ideas that I would like to, all kinds of images of a garment, not designs ideas. Oh, I would really like a garment that looks like this. And I'm talking about more non-traditional knits. But then the next project, the next process for me is to figure out a construction method for that image in my head. And many times when I get to that stage, okay, how will you construct this? I realize that I might be able to construct it, but then I won't be able to write that down. As designers, I think we are limited by the amount of words we can put in a pattern. And even though my patterns are not short by any means, they are very long and very detailed, and I go in many directions, there's always a limit to that. You cannot give instructions stitch by stitch, because they will be just too
An
immense.
essay.
Yes, and I think that's the tricky part of designing, to find a way, a logical way to write something that could potentially be an essay. And then you need to put it into a more compact format, and also to bring that into different sizes. So you might be able to create a very, very exquisite cable that swirls around your body, but if you cannot transform that into a pattern for everyone, then I probably won't go in that direction. I will try to find an idea that can be written for many sizes.
Yeah, okay. So can you talk about some of your designs? You've got some hanging behind you there. So could you take 3 or 4 of your favorite ones and talk about the design features and construction for us?
Yes. Okay, so this one is called Meridian. It's a pattern that I designed now several years ago, and it's one of my favorites. And what I like the most about this design is the way it's constructed. To begin this pattern, to begin to building this sweater, you need to first make the back piece, and then what you create is the skirt of the sweater that is knitted sideways, and it has some short rows introduced here that give the design its flattering shape, sort of an A-line. And then you have to seam this part here. And with that same skirt, what you build is the front of the cardigan, like that. And I really love the way it drapes. I think it's very feminine and flattering for any shape. And then the last thing that you have to add to the sweater are the sleeves. You just have to pick up stitches and knit them from the top down, and then you're done. It sounds easy, it's not.
And there's a cable pattern on the back, is that right?
Yes, there are cables running down the back and some double stitch here, and the same details are repeated here in the bottom to make it more flowy and to give it more movement.
And what kind of yarn is used on it?
I used a blend of merino and silk, which I think it's perfect for drapey garments. This was a blend by the Uncommon Thread. It was my first time working with British yarns, actually. I love it. And it has held really well, even though I wear it a lot. This is called All Romance. It's one of my favorite designs. And this was one of those where you actually challenge yourself to construct a garment in a not so typical way. So for me, the idea for this sweater was that I wanted a lace band for the sleeves. But I didn't just want it to be a lace band. I wanted it to be in a different color, and I wanted it to look like if someone had sewn it on top of the sweater. So I had to figure out a way to pick up stitches here, but allowing the lace band to have this edge sticking out of the knit. And yes, so that took me a few attempts. And when I actually achieved it, I was very pleased with this design, because the rest of the cardigan is very simple. You pick up stitches from the lace band, and then you work towards the front, and the same. You pick up stitches from the lace band and you work towards the back, and it has no shaping. The only tricky part of this design is that, of course, because of the way these stitches are oriented, you have to graft the bottom of the sleeve, and that's a bit intimidating for some knitters, not for myself, but yeah, so that's the only thing I would consider sort of difficult of the design. I love to wear open front cardigans. As you can tell, many knitters have added a detail, a button here, but for me, my favorite way of wearing is like that.
It's very beautiful. And it's so elegant just having that lace panel, and it really does look like lace that's been sewn on.
Thanks. This is gathered together. It's my mom's favorite design, so now it belongs to her. And this design was created with some friends in mind. They were going to meet at Rhinebeck, and they wanted to have a special sweater for the occasion, and they gave me a few guidelines. They said, Joji, would you design something that has cables, that is buttoned, and that it has pockets? And so I came up with this design. The cables, I wanted it to have cables, but I wanted to have them in an unusual way. So to make this sweater, you start building this section of the cardigan, and the actual place where you start is here in the center of this cable. So you work in opposite directions, and you get this central eye, and then you move towards the front. And there are some short rows included in the cable design to give the sweater the circular yoke shape. And when you're finished with that band, then you pick up stitches and you continue with a bit of a raglan shape to achieve your final stitch counts. And then there's some A-line shaping, because I find that it's the most flattering shape for a long cardigan. And of course, they had asked for pockets, so they had pockets. What they didn't ask for, and that I like, it's this rounded hem here at the bottom, that I think it gives the cardigan a more modern look. And when I tried it on, I realized that it was actually too open at the top. So I completed it with a band, an upper band for the yoke that brings the neckline a bit up to avoid having it too low. So I think that with that we achieved the perfect fit. This is a new design, and it's called Granito. It's a basic looking pullover. It's made with a blend of merino and linen called Milo from Manos del Uruguay, which I really like. It's my first time working with this type of yarn. And I really like the heathery look that it gave to the garment. And even though it looks very simple, there are some tricks to it that I enjoyed making and writing. The first is a column of drop stitches that I don't know if it shows really well, but it's there. It's a column of drop stitches that makes like a relief. And the same happens in the back. And between those two lines, there's a hidden pocket here and another one on the other side. Pockets are my favorite feature for a sweater. And this sweater is built from the top down. It has short rows in the shoulders to make the saddles fit better. And also a new feature that I liked was that instead of using a provisional cast on for the shoulders, which is what I was doing previously for this type of sweater, I left an exposed seam, and I think that it gives this sweater much more structure, and it's definitely more hard wearing now that it has that. And yes, so I really like this design. It's one of my favorite to wear.
Thank you, Jorge, for showing us your gorgeous designs. It's really whetted my appetite to be knitting some more of your designs, and I'm sure it has for the viewers as well. Let's finish off now with one last question, and that is there anything that you have got that's in your immediate future that you'd like to share with us? Anything exciting, any new plans?
Well, actually, I don't know when this episode is airing, but today I'm releasing a collection that includes this sweater that I just showed you, and it's called Favorite Things. It's a tiny collection of 4 patterns, 3 jumpers, and a lace shawl. So if you want to take a look, I hope you like it.
I'm sure we will. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to get to know you a little bit and talk to you about your designing and your knitting history. And I think the viewers are going to feel very privileged to get an inside view of you as well. So thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you, Andrea, for having me. It's been the greatest honor, and thank you everyone for watching also.
Okay, we'll say goodbye now. Bye.
Okay.